Good evening. Campers in Victoria's tent city are on borrowed time. They have 3 weeks to pull up stakes. Provincial officials served notice on them today, but some campers say they're serving it right back. They like where they live and they plan to stay. CTV's Yvonne Raymond reports.
Campers on the courthouse lands will need to make alternate arrangements for shelter as soon as possible.
People living at Victoria's tent city expected this day to come. Provincial officials asked them to leave by February 25th.
Just say your piece and walk away, eh? You don't want to hear what we have to say about it?
But it's an announcement many of them don't want to hear.
You're no longer welcome.
Facing an angry mob, the officials leave, but not before offering 2 new shelter options.
The province will be providing additional 88 units of transitional housing and shelter, as well as 40 rent supplements for campers currently residing in Victoria Courthouse lawns.
This former care centre will soon offer 38 low-barrier housing units.
That'll be for about a year, and as we do that, we'll do community consultation what the long-term use of that particular facility will be.
It's a plan some here are okay with.
I think that maybe this option might be all right for those who need to be in a house to take care of their medical needs.
But Chris Brett isn't okay with the second option. Outdoor and indoor shelter space will open for people in View Royal at the former Victoria Youth Custody Centre.
I grew up in and out of government care, in and out of a youth containment centre. I know that I wouldn't choose, even in a worse moment, to go and live there because of the memories that it would bring back.
The minister responsible for housing says the province is offering the homeless opportunities he expects them to take advantage of.
The reality is these folks said they're camping there because they have no place to go. We're creating spaces for them to have a place to go.
If what they're putting on the table and offering to help build with us is going to help even 40 people at each place, it's a good thing to me.
Still, campers here say no one has truly listened to what they want, and they don't want to lose the most important thing they've built together, a sense of community.
I've already filed an affidavit. I'm willing to go to court. I've said that in the beginning, and I'm still saying that.
For those who aren't interested in leaving, that's what it could come down to. Yvonne Raymond, CTV News, Victoria.
BC's children's watchdog says the province is failing a child living at Victoria's tent city. The teen is supposed to be in government care. Instead, she's homeless. Her version of school recently learning how to administer antidote to neighbors who OD. Life is hard, but the 16-year-old says it's better than the alternative. CTV's Rob Buffum reports.
It's a cold, windy day at Victoria's tent city. A patch of muddy, garbage-strewn lawn that's become home to the otherwise homeless, including a 16-year-old girl.
I'm in the care of the Ministry of CFD, but they didn't do a very good job of taking care of me, so I decided to take care of myself.
We've concealed her identity for legal reasons because of her age, but the teenager wanted us to know her story and how she feels let down by the system.
They control your life and how far it goes and how far it doesn't go, so I'd rather be here in Tent City than in any of their care homes.
She's been in the care of the government since she was 13. That's when her adoptive parent gave her up.
So let's just throw her back. It's kind of like a return gift almost. It's like kind of hard to deal with.
Since then, she has been shuffled from foster care to most recently a group home. She says outreach workers visit her here every day and her social worker knows she lives here, but is rarely visited. This is the shelter she helped build and that she now calls home and has slept in every night since mid-October. It's somewhere she goes to sleep on big nights like Christmas Eve, and it's where she woke up Christmas morning.
Community, it's a family. Like, everybody looks out for each other.
The watchdog for children in the province says she's disgusted by the number of kids in government care living in hotels or homeless camps.
I think British Columbians need to open their eyes and realize that kids are on the fringes. They are basically feeling rejected and spit out.
Trapel Lafon says the system has failed kids like this teen.
And any of us who have raised teenagers know a 16-year-old can have needs as significant as a 2-year-old.
She worries about the dangers here, like the drug overdose death and the stabbing, both last month.
He hit the ground 2-3 feet away from me. I came out of my tent and there was a body on the ground.
The province wouldn't comment on this specific case, issuing a statement. In a case like this, social workers would collaborate with local law enforcement to encourage the youth to leave the courthouse lawn and return to a safe environment. Efforts to return children and youth to safe environments often require continued attempts and engagement on the part of social workers. This girl says she has no desire to return to her group home and just wants to be left alone to grow up.
I don't really miss the parent figures because I didn't have them, so I didn't know what I had to miss.
Robert Buffum, CTV News, Victoria.
Campers on the lawn of Victoria's courthouse are free to stay indefinitely. The BC Supreme Court's top judge is refusing to grant the province a temporary injunction to oust people from the so-called tent city. CTV's Yvonne Raymond has more on the ruling and mixed reaction.
Tent City campers celebrate a major victory with their lawyer and supporters.
I was so nervous right up until now because I mean it's an immense amount of work and we're unprepared as to where we were going to all go,
But not everyone in the neighborhood is cheering.
There's so much stuff that has gone on that is harming these people who live around Tent City that it's just hard for a reasonable person to say there's no harm that's going on. These people are threatened, literally threatened daily.
The BC Supreme Court's top judge has turned down a request for a temporary injunction that would push campers off the courthouse land.
I'm really happy that they ruled in our favor because it means me and my family get to stay together, man.
The written ruling saying the government didn't prove that it will suffer irreparable harm if an interim injunction is not granted.
I respect the court's decision in this matter.
The judge also worries that issuing an injunction would simply push the homelessness problems to other areas of Victoria.
Our primary goal is to work with those that are at that location to find housing solutions to them, finding solutions towards health care, finding solutions for mental care.
Victoria's mayor says the city will offer its support, but the next move must come from the legislature.
Now it's time for the province to step up and manage the site. Now, I don't know how you staff a tenting area in the middle of downtown, but again, we'll provide any input we can to the province.
It's unclear how many people are still calling Tent City home.
Thank you.
And while they celebrate now, their fight isn't over yet. The province could still win the right to kick them off this lawn at a trial set for September. Yvonne Raymond, CTV News, Victoria.
We begin tonight with breaking news out of Victoria's Tent City, which is no longer just an eyesore. It has degenerated into what many would say is now an outrage. In 24 hours, 2 violent attacks, one of them on a CTV News cameraman. His name is Kirk Duncan. He's a husband, a father, and a man who takes a lot of pride in his job.
Without asking me. Yeah, you are too.
Enough.
Get the out of here.
This afternoon, he was doing his job, covering the most recent news at Tent City when he was confronted. Kirk was assaulted in an unprovoked attack, punched, kicked, and thrown to the ground. Vic PD moved fast. Kirk's suspected attacker is already in custody. And always the sharpshooter, as you can see here. Kirk got video even as he defended himself. He will be okay, but at this point, with Tent City still in legal limbo, there is nothing to guarantee it won't happen again to someone else. The minister responsible for housing says it will try again as early as next week to shut down the homeless camp in the public park. The announcement comes at a time when people living around the camp and the campers living within its confines have hit their boiling points. CTV's Yvonne Raymond has more.
During a media attempt to gather reaction to the latest announcement from the BC government, tempers rise at Tent City.
What? You filming me without asking me.
He wasn't filming you.
Yeah, you filming me without asking me. Yeah, you are too.
Enough.
Get the out of here. Yeah, you're still filming me as we talk.
Don't be.
Why are you filming me?
Enough. We can't have this.
This guy's filming me?
We can't have this.
Get out. Get out. Get out of here.
An hour before this attack, the minister responsible for housing announces the province will head back to court next week in a second attempt to oust campers from the courthouse lawns.
I wouldn't expect anything less from a bully like Rich Coleman. I mean, I think that he's wasting a lot of taxpayers' dollars that could be going into services.
The Office of the Fire Commission has determined that the courthouse site is not in compliance with the fire safety order that was issued on May and 11th.
That report's summary saying there has been a deterioration of the camp since the last inspection, and that overall the danger to life safety created by the fire hazards is increasing and considered to be only a matter of time before a serious fire incident occurs.
It would be irresponsible for us to not try for an injunction again. We tried for one before and weren't granted one, but I think these levels of concern, plus the increased levels of crime and violence in the area in and around the courthouse and the risk to other folks in the area, which we'll also present to the courts, have to be taken into consideration.
We can't have this. You guys filming? We can't have this.
In the assault against a CTV cameraman who was pushed and kicked, a spokesperson for Tent City tries to hold the attacker back, and it doesn't take long before police have their suspect in custody without incident.
Obviously, it's very concerning when the media is down here conducting interviews that something of this nature would happen.
But that is not all. The night before, police respond to reports of a building manager across the street who was robbed.
I spoke with his wife, Lori, this morning as soon as I'd heard of it. Don went around the back of the building just to check, as he normally does before turning in. Found a woman there that obviously didn't belong, asked her to move along, and then was jumped by two fellas that he didn't see.
Officers say the victim's wallet was stolen and he wasn't seriously hurt.
We're appealing for witnesses, anyone that was in the area that heard anything or saw anything, especially the female. We're asking them to call police or call Crime Stoppers anonymously.
No one knows whether the attackers came from Tent City, but this building owner says these problems didn't exist until it started.
We would get maybe 1 or 2 calls to the police a year. Now it's, almost daily.
As for CTV's cameraman, he's okay. Yvonne Raymond, CTV News, Victoria.
Good evening. Campers at Victoria's Tent City are starting to pull up stakes 2 days after a Supreme Court ruling and more than a month before the court-imposed deadline. A dozen of them are heading to transitional living at the Choices Shelter in View Royal. And as CTV's Rob Buffum reports, it's a place that's making a real difference.
Staff are preparing the newest home at Choices Shelter, expecting the first wave of residents from Tent City after a judge ordered them out on Monday. This 16-year-old moved here 3 days ago. She's bounced between group homes and government care and is excited to build a new life after coming here from Tent City.
Like our home is better than any house I've ever been in my entire life. They control your life.
We first met her this winter, concealing her identity for legal reasons. Rats were discovered in the wooden structure she was living in last week. She says her new digs give her a new chance in life.
It's a good move to make, especially if you want to get on your feet and get better.
Shelby Edison moved here from Tent City 4 months ago. Since then, she's recovered from a crack addiction and has added 40 pounds to her frame that was once just 65 pounds because food was so scarce and her addiction.
I could swallow, but I couldn't get the food down into my stomach, so I was reduced to liquids and stuff for a while. But being here, I was more relaxed. It was more of a routine.
Edison credits the environment here with giving her a second chance.
Where you thought you was lost, you didn't have any more hope, that was it for you, especially at my age. And that changed.
To be sure, life is far from perfect for the 60-some-odd at the shelter. Joseph Reville also moved from Tent City. He says it's a good start, but the key for him is affordable housing.
There's no place for a guy just to rent an apartment for less than, what, $800-900 a month?
Still, when you consider where they came from and what they're doing now, it's easy to see they're in a better place. 10 more former neighbors from Tent City are expected to join them in the coming days.
Rob Buffum's live now with more. Rob, you've covered Tent City extensively over the past 2 months and actually gotten to know many of the campers. How does the mood at the shelter compare?
Well, Andrew, it was really like night and day. People at the shelter seemed much happier. The place is clean, there's 3 square meals a day, and there's plenty of stimulation. For example, there's a garden where they're growing vegetables, a gym, and the art room. And obviously, it's not just many of the campers that will be happy about the upcoming moves. Vic PD's latest figures show calls for service to the Tent City area were up by 473 since the camp started compared to the previous year. So neighbors there will clearly also be happy. Andrew.
Okay, Rob Buffum, thank you. The Victoria Courthouse campers are gone, but 2 weeks later, the rats remain. The former Tent City site is infested with a rodent problem so bad, cleanup is on hold. The rats are also adding to the rising cost for taxpayers. That's now surpassed the $1 million mark. CTV's Rob Buffum reports.
The muddy, grubby land that was once Tent City is barren. It looks empty, but it isn't.
Oh, about 15 to 20 rats, and they're, fair size. They're not babies, they're fair size.
Cleanup work has been delayed here because rats like these, thriving when campers were here, are still around. Some thought to be buried, triggering these traps seen all over the once grass-covered field.
As far as I know, they're supposed to eat the poison and take off and die.
The rats have now also migrated across the street.
We've got traps there, we've got traps on every side of the building.
And some of the resourceful rodents even found a way to get in out of the cold. It appears the rat problem migrated to the courthouse next door. A security guard there told us that starting about a month ago when she'd come into the building to unlock it for the day, she'd be met by a pack of rats scurrying out of the building. She said she hasn't seen the rats for about 2 weeks, but we noticed there are still traps on the perimeter of the courthouse. The cost to eradicate the rats, $6,500 so far. Pittance compared to the $1.3 million the province spent to manage Tent City since December for things like fire extinguishers, fencing, and security, or the additional upcoming remediation costs pegged as high as $350,000. For some neighbors, news of the soaring costs is adding to their anger.
My blood was boiling. Just because as a taxpayer, I'm furious about that.
This pest control expert isn't surprised it's taken over 2 weeks to battle the rodents.
People sort of expect immediate results and actions, but we're talking about highly intelligent, social, live animals.
It could take weeks to get rid of the rats before the cleanup and eventually new life for this patch of park that sure doesn't look like one now. Robert Buffum, CTV News, Victoria.